try this again. All right. Hello and welcome in, everybody. I am Garrett Shumake, and this is the Shumake Take, the second episode. And this is a new football podcast, new football thing that I'm doing, showing my passion for the game and getting to talk to other people that share the same passion. So, before I actually started the show, I had a little bit of a mishap, and my script for this episode was completely scrapped. I had it on a Google Doc. I don't know what the heck happened. It somehow deleted itself. But shame on me for not making a backup. So, at the time I'm recording right now, it is 9:50. I wanted to get this done at like 7 o'clock. So I am very far behind. I got work in the morning. And, and now I had to turn all the fans off in my room so no noises in the background. And it's hot in here. I don't know if you can tell the sweat on my forehead, but I am sweating. But we're going to get through it and making sure my mic is good to go. Yep, we're still cooking. And let's begin. Before we begin, this episode is going to be about finishing the recap of free agency. I'm going to cover the most notable trades that happened. I forgot to do that in the last episode. I didn't think about it. So we're going to do that first. Then we're going to talk about another free agent signing that's semi-related, something that has to do with Chicago, maybe Pittsburgh, maybe Denver. You know what's going on here. It makes sense. It'll fit. So I can't be upset at myself for forgetting that. But then at the end, we'll just recap some of the best free agents still available by each position. I'm not going to cover each player in full detail, but I'm just going to do a quick rapid fire of who they are as a player and where I think, not where I think it would fit. That's a little bit too complicated, the time that we have. But maybe just say, hey, this is where they are in their careers and this is what I like about them and what they could do for a team going here into 2024. So enough rambling, enough complaining about the Heat and not saving copies of your script. Let's get into it, starting with Brian Burns. He goes to the New York Giants for a 2nd and a 5th round pick. And if you're Carolina, you're sick. I'm sorry. I'm not a Carolina Panthers fan, but as an outsider looking in, it still makes me sick to my stomach. The Carolina Panthers, if I believe correctly, tried to trade for Brian Burns last year, and we were asking for 2 first-round picks or something like that, or a first-round pick. They were trying to get at least a first-round pick, and they turned it down. And so now they got to give him up for practically chump change compared to the first round pick, especially for a really young, not say really young, but a young guy, a really good pass rusher, really good edge guy, and Brian Burns. The Giants are giving him a new big contract. It was 5 years. I don't remember. I'm not gonna say anything. I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to provide misinformation. But either way, what is true information, what is fact, is that Carolina is much worse off on defense without Brian Burns. And for the Giants, they get a piece and add on to that defensive line that already has Kayvon Thibodeau and Dexter Lawrence. And right there, that's what I like to see. If you're the New York Giants, something that you really needed to bolster, regardless of the holes that you had on your roster, something that I think you really probably needed to bolster was your defensive line a little bit. Well, I know that's kind of like a hot take, and normally I wouldn't be for that if you're a team that's kind of rebuilding-ish, right? You kind of want to plug your holes, you want to plug your hole at this spot. You don't really want to bolster something you're already kind of good at, but at the same time, I kind of get it, because right now the Giants are kind of stuck in a purgatory at the moment, because I don't remember how much salary cap space they have, but I don't remember if it being top 10. It may have been fringe top 10, but maybe in the middle of the pack. But also, you're stuck with Daniel Jones as of right now. You just got rid of Saquon Barkley, which, however you feel about that. But right now, the Giants feel almost like in a limbo. And so, hey, at least, getting Brian Burns, putting him in your defensive line, you're bolstering something that you know is going to be good and make it even better. And I've said it before, if you bolster any position on your football team, right, that already has some talent, but you add more talent to it, I'm not going to sit here and say, that's a bad move. No, it's always a good move. Sometimes, it's not as good of a move as if, depending on the time and the situation. But regardless, it was a good move. Good job, New York Giants. Carolina Panthers, what are you doing? What are you actually doing? But that's my thoughts on that. Now we're going to get a little bit more negative as Jeudy goes to Cleveland and gets like a 3-year, $58 million extension as well. They got him for like a 6th-round pick or something like that. And right here, if I'm Cleveland, what are you doing? This is another what are you doing thing for me. Because Jeudy, as talented as he has not been able to put together here in the NFL. He hasn't. And to give a guy a contract extension that's about $17 million per year, well, it's not a super big contract compared to what the top 10 highest paid receivers are getting. It's close. And for a guy who hasn't hit 1,000 yards, for a guy that's just been up and down his entire career, I don't see it. I simply don't see it yet. Now, with that being said, I hope he goes to Cleveland and lights the league on fire. Right? I'm not saying I hope he fails. No, I never want a player to fail. But I just don't get this move. I just simply don't get it. And, for Denver, they've been they're at a fire sale. I mean, they've let go a ton of players. We're going to get a couple of them more a little later in the show. Russell Wilson, Justin Simmons. They also let go Lloyd Cushenberry. Right? So, I mean, they're just doing a complete fire sale. I mean, they're literally going into full-on rebuild mode. And I guess getting rid of Jeudy makes sense for them. A guy who was kind of up and down and really, didn't reach his potential. So, I mean, I guess it's best for both sides just to go part ways. And Jeudy does get to go into a good situation where he has good receivers around him. Right? So he doesn't have to worry about being that number one target. And then he's got Deshaun Watson, which no matter what you say about him, he is still a good quarterback, right, when he's on the field. So you have that. And you also have a good running game, a top 5 offensive line. Offensively, you're going to a much better situation. So for that, by all means. The contract, I'm a little iffy on, but who knows? I could be wrong. I'm rooting for him to do well. But as of right now, at this second, if I'm a Cleveland Browns fan, I'm not scratching my head, but I'm just like, huh? That's it. It's just, huh? What are we doing? That's my thought here, pretty much. And so now we're gonna get into a couple quarterbacks. We got a little bit of a quarterback carousel going on, by the way. And if it feels like I'm going really fast, it's because I am. How do I explain this? I don't know. Maybe I'm just a fast talker. That might just be it. Who knows? But we need to continue. So Sam Howell goes to the Seattle Seahawks. And this is a move that wasn't super surprising. I thought it was a possibility. Because Sam Howell, at the start of last year, was doing pretty good despite the team being horrible. But later on down the stretch, he absolutely just, his production, I don't say his production, but his overall play and how good it was fell off a cliff. And it's very disappointing because I wanted to see more. I was hoping that Washington would go get an offensive head coach. Brian Johnson was set to go there. Then he decided to back out at the last minute, and then they had to, out of desperation, they got Dan Quinn, which is, I really don't like that move. But, new coach, new regime, it usually means new quarterback. And, well, Sam Howell's out the door. But I think he's going to a good situation in Seattle where Geno Smith, I almost said Geno Stone. Geno Smith is getting older. Eventually, he's going to retire. And maybe you bring in Sam Howell, a guy who's super talented, who has a great arm, and maybe sit behind a good veteran quarterback for a couple of years and then take the reins. I could see that happening. I doubt it at this point in Sam Howell's career. Actually, he's only going to year 3, so maybe I'll take that back. But we'll see. Regardless, I do like the move. At the very, very least, Seattle's getting a very good backup. At the very, very least. But we'll see. Maybe the change of scenery helps. But once we get into talking about the draft, this almost pretty much confirms it for me that Washington's going to draft a quarterback. But that's later on down the line. Desmond Ridder goes to the Arizona Cardinals. He was also traded for some late round pick. And I really like this move. I really like it because Desmond Ridder, his play style fits in Arizona. A guy who has some speed, who has some wheels, and can run around a little bit, run for yards, right? And he's a good locker room guy too. He's a good leader, from what I've heard. And like I said, he's a good scheme fit for Arizona. Plays similar to Kyler Murray, and this is good. I can't say it enough. Like, this is good. Like, it's not gonna be a trade. Of course, it's gonna be great, or like knock it out of the park. But Desmond Ridder has the ability to be a valuable backup in this league, and his skill set is different compared to most backups, in my opinion. Not very many backups that at least are quality in this league have the athletic ability. I should say athletic ability, but the ability to run around and the speed that Desmond Ridder has. Not that he's super fast, but he still has some. Like I said, he has some wheels. So I think he'll be a good backup to Kyler Murray if he ever goes down, and he'll step in. I don't know how many games he's gonna win. I doubt he'll win very many. But I hope that as a backup, he can stable the ship if Kyler Murray ever goes down. Overall, I think this is a really good move. It sucks that it didn't work out in Arizona, because I don't want to say that he was in a bad position to succeed because he had weapons around him. Maybe it was because, I don't know, Arthur Smith would have been the right head coach if he knew how to use his players properly. That's the thing. With Arthur Smith, if he knew how to use his players properly, as much as he loves to run the football, a dual threat of Bijan Robinson and Desmond Ridder probably wouldn't have been that bad. But instead, he'd rather hand the ball off to Tyler Algier a whole bunch of times. But that's a discussion for another day. But I think there was a lot of untapped potential there. I'm not going to say Desmond Ridder's going to light the world on fire, but I think there was a lot more that we could have saw if he had a better head coach. But either way, he goes to be a backup where he's a good fit. And overall, good for Arizona for making this trade. And it makes sense now that Atlanta's got Kirk Cousins. So I think both teams won in the end with who they wanted to go get. Now this one's pretty wild. Mac Jones gets traded to Jacksonville. And this also cements that New England's going to draft a quarterback for me. So Mac Jones is a quarterback similar to Desmond Ridder, where he just was not put into a good situation. His rookie year was great. They made the playoffs. They went 10-6 or 10-7. 10-7. And unfortunately, year 2, he had Matt Patricia as his offensive coordinator. So, of course, the offense was dog crap. I almost said the wrong word. And next year, he had Bill O'Brien, which you thought would be an upgrade, but he still had no talent around him. A subpar offensive line at best. His number one receiver being Juju Smith-Schuster, Devontae Parker, and then Kendrick Bourne. Right? They drove Mike Gesicki's career into the dirt, where he wasn't that good of a tight end. Johnny Smith didn't work out at all. He ended up being traded in 2023, I think. Right? Something like that. Hunter Henry has been okay. But definitely, there's not enough talent at wide receiver and offensive line to really help Mac Jones. And it really wasn't fair. But you know what? It is what it is. He goes to Jacksonville, I think that's where he grew up, if I'm not mistaken. But he gets to go to a situation where he sits behind Trevor Lawrence, a fellow first-round pick from 2021. And listening to his press conference, he sounded very happy. He sounded very energetic. He was laughing. He was joking with the reporters. And it feels like he's in a better situation where he can just focus on football and take a lesser role and be happy. If that's the case, then try not to clap too loud. I don't want to, break the mic and break your eardrums. But either way, good for him. He seems happy. I'm rooting for him. And maybe he'll be fun to watch in a Jacksonville Jaguars uniform in this preseason. All right, now we're starting to get into the nitty-gritty. Diontae Johnson goes to the Carolina Panthers. So we start off with Carolina making a fat L move, and now they're making a good W move. Diontae Johnson is a player who really has not been... He has not been able to... I should say he hasn't reached his potential. I feel like the offensive situation around him has prevented him from reaching his potential, because a couple years ago, he was a 1,000-yard receiver. He was really good, and these past couple of years just have not been it. Poor quarterback play from Kenny Pickett really deterred it. A an offensive line that's, from what I've known, to be up and down for a recent time now, and just overall on offensive ineptitude. I mean, we don't need to get to talking about Matt Canada. We already know about how bad that guy was. But it got so bad to a point where people were questioning his effort. Now, I don't know if... I doubt that's the guy who he is. Because when he had Ben Roethlisberger, that boy was putting in the work. That boy was putting up numbers. So I think going into a new situation where he has a young quarterback to work with and Bryce Young, who works really hard, I think it helps Bryce Young. Obviously it helps Bryce Young. Duh. He gets a new weapon. And I think it's very close where Carolina, they're picking in the 33rd overall, first pick in the second round. They could be in very prime position to draft one of these, tier 2 receivers in a draft, like a Xavier Worthy or a Donnie Mitchell. And I think if you have Adam Thielen, Diontae Johnson, and A.D. Mitchell or Xavier Worthy, or another one of these guys, I think you have a top 16 receiver trio in the league. Where you immediately went from arguably 32nd, you jump halfway through the league and landed around 16th. And that's really good. And like I said, and we talked about before, Carolina got Robert Hunt. So they're trying to put pieces around Bryce Young, which I like. And it gets Pittsburgh moves on from a clearly disgruntled receiver. It hurts them a lot. But hey, Carolina wins in this trade as of right now. And I'm excited to see how that will turn out. We move on to Kenny Pickett. I talked about him a second ago. Poor quarterback play, an injury, and overall an offensive ineptitude has made him land in Philly. And I think this is a good move for Kenny Pickett. While people might give me a lot of hate for this, that I would say he's going to a better situation, I think he is. Because here's the deal. Just like Mac Jones, he's going to the team that, to the area where he grew up in. Kenny Pickett grew up as a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and all the pressure that Pittsburgh gives you in that market, and overall just the struggles that they had on offense and his injuries. It wouldn't surprise me if Kenny Pickett went there just like Mac Jones. Mac Jones wasn't traded there, but by will. But I'm thinking Kenny Pickett is going to be happier in Philly. Obviously, he's not going to get a chance to play back with Jalen Hurts there. But he gets to play with his childhood team. He gets to enjoy football, just like Mac Jones. And I'm saying, I'm glorifying the backup position here for them, not because for a specific reason. Because being a backup quarterback is actually one of the better jobs in the NFL. And you know what? I might make that a rant. So I'm gonna write that down in a little bit at the end of the show. And yeah, Shumake Take Rants, probably episode 5 will be about how the backup quarterback position is better than most people think about. But either way, Kenny Pickett goes to Philly, and that leads to Pittsburgh getting a couple more guys adding to their roster that we're going to get to in a minute. But first, speaking of Chicago, we got to talk about Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen goes to Chicago, and this is a great move. This is an absolutely great move for the Bears. You pair him up with DJ Moore. You already have DeAndre Swift and Khalil Herbert. You have a couple young pieces on the offensive line. And, right now, the offense in Chicago doesn't look that bad on paper. Now, of course, we have to see what happens, of course. But right now, their offense could be maybe middle of the pack. It's not going to be bad. It's not going to be a bad offense. I'll tell you that right now. Guaranteed this offense will not be bad. And if this offense is bad, it's poor coaching. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say right here, I think Caleb Williams is going number 1 overall. I'm not breaking any news here. But if you have Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Khalil Herbert, DeAndre Swift, and a young developing offensive line, if you are a bad offense with all those pieces, your coaching staff is bad. I'm not going to elaborate too much there, but Keenan Allen, he's a good veteran receiver who can work anywhere. I've seen him work in a slide. He can work outside. He's very quick. He's a very, very good route runner, which I really like because Chicago really had trouble. The receivers had a lot of trouble of getting separation outside of DJ Moore. And here's a guy who's a good separator. So it's a really good move. I like it. I don't know how many yards he's going to produce, but he's going to produce plenty. And I think it's going to help Caleb Williams make his bid for Offensive Rookie of the Year. And now we get to Justin Fields being traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I know Chicago Bears fans are upset, and they feel like he's been done dirty. And I'll be right there with you. He was done dirty a little bit. And it stinks knowing that he was just traded just as it seems like the Bears front office was finally starting to build a competent offense around him. Just checking my mic. And, just as it seems like everything's finally starting to come together somewhat, they let him go. And it does leave me scratching my head a little bit. But the more I thought about it, I realized, look, Justin Fields, yes, he has a lot of potential. Yes, he hasn't made it work, whether that's his fault or not. I watched the film on him just to see what was going on. And even when he had time to throw and his receivers were getting open, he wasn't pulling the trigger. Now, normally, yes, you got to be able to do that. But people don't talk about, if you don't trust your receivers or you don't trust your offensive line, you don't trust. It makes it really, when they're that bad, it makes it really hard to trust them. So when stuff goes right, your first instinct is to still not trust them, and it doesn't make things better. I mean, obviously, I don't know what's going on through Justin Fields' mind, right? I'm not a mind reader, or I'm saying that's what he's doing, or that's what he's thinking. But that football is a very trust-oriented sport, and it's the foundation of everything you do, and that's something not a lot of people talk about. So, with that being said, yeah, Justin Fields was done a little dirty. While some rumors circulated, okay, yeah, he wanted to go to Pittsburgh, he wanted to be traded there, so that's where Chicago sent him. So, okay, cool, I guess. But bottom line is, if you're Chicago and you have the number 1 overall pick and you have the opportunity to add on 5 more years to build your roster to become a Super Bowl contender, I'm taking that. With Caleb Williams, I'm taking that. Would you rather have 2 years to really get this thing together before you pay Justin Fields? Or would you rather have 5 years to go and give yourself more time with a more talented quarterback, in my opinion, in Caleb Williams? And the politics of the NFL tell you, you take that prospect, you take Caleb Williams. I mean, that's just what you do. But now we got to move on. I'm trying my best here. My throat is so dry, I forgot water again. We're getting there. So, with Justin Fields to Pittsburgh, Russell Wilson follows. Now, from what I've heard, Russell Wilson's going to be the starter and Justin will be the backup, which I think is fine because it allows Russell Wilson, the veteran, to go in there, produce at a high level, hopefully, and pretty much stabilize and level up. Stabilize and level. We'll just stick with that. Stabilize and really level what has been a very putrid, awful offense. Now, I don't know how good they're going to be under Arthur Smith, which is where he went to be the next, to be an offensive coordinator. But I like the move because Russell Wilson, he can still run around a little bit, buy time, extend plays. He's a veteran. He's won a lot. He has experience. And he goes to a better situation than Denver, where he's clearly wanted. He has good pieces around him, right? Not that very many compared to, last year, the Pittsburgh Steelers offense is kind of in a bad spot-ish. I should say they're in a bad spot, but they're not in a great spot. They really need to retool, I think, before we're going into this year, or else this offense is going to be horrifically disappointing. But either way, he's going to be the starter. I hope he does well. Justin Fields will be the backup. Maybe he learns a thing or two and comes in next year as a starter and is great and reaches his potential. Mike Tomlin's a guy that loves to get the most out of, or he does get the most out of his players. Obviously, I'm sure he loves to do that as well. But either way, that's what he does. He's a winning coach. Never had a losing season. No matter how low-hanging of a fruit that is for his playoff success, no matter how you feel about that, it is really hard to win in this league. And being a coach that has never had a losing season, that is an accomplishment in and of itself. So Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, both of them go to better situations, I think, organizationally and culturally and with coaching. And I think that we could see really good quarterback play in 2024 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, now we got the best available free agents. Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to take a break. I'm going to take a 2-minute break or something like that, drink some water, and yeah, I will be right back. All right, and we are back. Thank you for patiently waiting approximately 0.5 seconds of video time. But we got free agents to cover, the best available free agents. I said it before at the beginning of the show, but we're going to do it again. So I'm just going to cover the best available free agents in my opinion by each position. And I got a laundry list here of a bunch of players. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about each player. I'm just going to talk about, kind of like where they are in their career, what I think they can provide to a team if they decide to sign them and play in 2024. Starting with the quarterbacks, my best available free agent quarterback is Ryan Tannehill at the moment. And we've talked a whole bunch about Ryan Tannehill, whether you're a Titans fan or not. You know about his story, up and down career in Miami, goes to Tennessee, brings him to the AFC Championship, then a couple winning seasons, number 1 seed, and then now a couple of disappointing seasons later, he is now a free agent. And Ryan Tannehill's a guy who, at this point in his career, is one of the best backups in the league, and probably as a starter will still perform at a high level. Right? It's not like he's going to be, how do I put this? Instead of saying it like that, he's going to be a guy that if he has to come in and play for your football team, kind of like Gardner Minshew, he's going to win you football games. Right? He's not going to be like a backup that's just stabilized the ship. No, he can come in and he can still be a starter and win you ball games. Right? That's what will make him one of the best backups in the league, because that's what he can do. And right below him, the number 2 guy is Carson Wentz. Now, people are going to laugh at me for this, but I have a good reason for this. Carson Wentz, how old is he now? I think he's either late 20s, early 30s. Regardless, Carson Wentz still has a big arm, right? And he's still a higher upside guy. I'm not saying higher upside, but potentially be a starter. No. But he's a guy that's still young enough to where, he could be a good backup. Right? I don't think after his career in Philly ended, it was just up and down. But we saw what he could do as a starter. In Indianapolis, they ended the season in a rather disappointing fashion a couple years ago. But he still played well. He still played well enough where I thought he deserved another year, another shot. And then he goes to Washington, where they started off great, and then they kind of fell off. And then they let Jacoby Brissett go in, then Sam Howell went in. But he's a guy like Ryan Tannehill who's going to come in and he'll win you a couple games. Now, he's closer to the stabilizing of the ship type of backup quarterback, but he can still go in. I think he can still play at a high level. I think he still has a lot of gas left in the tank. And like I said, he's late 20s, early 30s, so he still has at least a few more years of high-level play left in him, I believe. Now, going into the running backs, the best one available right now is Ezekiel Elliott. Well, yes, he is not what he used to be when he first came into the league, but he still showed signs that he can be, maybe not a bell cow, but he can still be productive. And a lot of these other guys down here that I have on the list, Ezekiel Elliott showed that he could, like I said, he could still be productive. He showed flashes in that New England offense and gave some really good bright spots, and he was one of those bright spots. He didn't light the league on fire. He didn't put up great numbers. I should say, yeah, he didn't put up great numbers. He put up good numbers. Not great numbers, but he put up good numbers. And he helped stabilize that running back room a little bit. And number 2 below him I have is Damian Harris. Damian Harris is a guy who's 31, I believe. And I'll pair him up with Cordero Patterson and Jerick McKinnon here that I have on my list. All these guys are players that they're not going to be your starting running back. They're not going to be, guys that are going to set the league on fire. But they're guys that can be a running back 2 or a running back 3, right? That can really flesh out your running back room, get him for cheap, and they can be productive, and they will make plays when you call the number. That's what you're going to get out of these players 100%. I have no doubt about that. Now, wide receivers, I have a little bit of a longer list. Not really, 2 more players. 6 against a 4. That's a huge jump, apparently. But I just realized I have my fan on. Let me cut that off. That's probably messing up audio, but we'll see. So, all right. So Tyler Boyd, he's the best free agent receiver right now, as of the recording of this video, by the way. And Tyler Boyd is just a example of a team that in the Cincinnati Bengals that's got to pay another receiver in Jamar Chase. They tagged T. Higgins, and they just simply don't got enough money to be able to pay 3 receivers. And nor should you ever pay 3 receivers. That's like the money that they're asking for. I mean, I should say the money they're asking for. Like, you got to pay Jamar Chase top receiver money. You're going to have to. T. Higgins, he requested a trade, but theoretically he'd be getting top 10 receiver money as well. And to put even more money into a slot receiver, that's just too much money. At that point, you're allocating too many resources in one position. Compared to New York, where it's Brian Burns, came on Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, yeah, it's okay because Thibodeau is still on a rookie contract. Dexter Lawrence is still on a rookie contract. So you still have the money to be able to afford another guy, right? But right there, you simply just don't have the money. It's too much resources to put into one spot. But Tyler Boyd, very good slot receiver. Wherever he goes, he's going to be, I think he's going to instantly, make 600, 700 yards at least. He was very productive in that offense with Zach Taylor. And even when Joe Burrow went down and Jake Browning came in, he still made plays. He was still productive. And that's what I think you're getting in Tyler Boyd. And a little bit low on the lower end, Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow is another really good slot receiver, former 1,000-yard receiver who really hasn't been maximized as much as I thought he would be in that Raiders offense. And I thought he produced more, honestly, with Devontae Adams. But that hasn't seemed to be the case. I think if you get Hunter Renfrow, add him to your team, he's another guy that will add about 500, 600 yards, add a few touchdowns. And at best, he's going to be a really good third down guy for you. And in the NFL, converting on third down and having a guy that's going to get open and consistently make plays in that situation is critical. And I think Hunter Renfrow can do that for you. Another younger-ish receiver, Michael Gallup, he was recently cut by the Dallas Cowboys, which is disappointing to see because he was a guy who was kind of up and down. I thought that he was going to really take a step up a couple years ago, and he had 1,300 yards. I thought he was going to really step up with CeeDee Lamb, but he's really kind of taken a backup role with CeeDee Lamb going nuts. He had a career year last year, and then you bring in Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks was good, and it kind of just sent Michael Gallup further and further down the totem pole. But I think a guy who can still, good outside receiver that can still be a 1,000-yard guy if he goes to the right situation. Obviously, he'll have to go to a situation, where he has to be like the definite number 1 or number 2 target. But definitely, if you force feed him the ball, he's a guy that's going to get you yards and he's going to get you points. Now, these 3 receivers, I'm going to group them all together: OBJ, Allen Robinson, and Michael Thomas. All these guys are veterans, had their fair share of injuries, and at this point in their careers, they're all veteran guys that you bring in. They're going to make a couple plays for you here and there. But most importantly, if you have a young wide receiving room, you bring these guys in to help mentor them, to help teach them the game, teach them their tricks, right? And they're a guy that, having a veteran presence that can elevate that room and make those younger guys play better. And OBJ, he was very disappointing last year. I thought he'd do more being the number 1, but it showed that he's far removed from what he used to be in New York. And same thing with Allen Robinson. Ever since he left Chicago, it was just all downhill from there. Just really did not do anything with the Rams. And then with Pittsburgh, I was so excited to see what he could do with Diontae Johnson, George Pickens. And then Matt Canada had to ruin everything for the most part. So that sucks. Now he's gone. And Michael Thomas, I think he demanded to be cut. He was very disgruntled with the organization. I don't really blame him, but that's a different topic for another day. But Michael Thomas, a very reliable guy. And whether you like him or not, slant boy or not, if he can stay healthy, he's a guy that will produce. I think he'd produce more than Allen Robinson and OBJ. But at this point in his career, I don't think anybody's going to bring him in to ask him to do that, to be super duper productive. But either way, he'll come in and he'll still be a guy that can make plays for you. For tight ends, it's kind of the same role here. Logan Thomas, CJ Uzomah, and Robert Tonyan. These are guys that are second and third tight ends where if you need them to make a play, they can come in and they can do a couple good things for you. They can catch a couple passes. They can make a couple blocks. They're good depth players that'll really flesh out that position for your team. Definitely, for sure. Offensive line, you have David Bakhtiari, who was recently released, Laken Tomlinson, Charles Leno, Andres Pete, whichever way that is. I'm I'm sorry if I butchered that. These are all guys that are in their early 30s, but guys that have proven that they can be successful in this league. And if you're noticing a common theme here, that's how it is with a lot of these free agents. Free agents that are late 20s, early 30s, guys that you can bring in on 1-2 year contracts and they will be productive for you. They won't be like absolutely nuts, but they can really stabilize the position for a couple years while you try and figure it out and get a new young guy in there. And that's how I view these first 4 guys. Because David Bakhtiari is a little bit of an outlier because he's been hurt and hasn't been able to stay healthy. But when he's been healthy, he's been arguably the best left tackle in the league. I mean, it's really hard to dispute that. But like I said, these are guys that'll stabilize the position for you for a couple years till you find another guy you can draft and bring in that you can develop. But these next couple guys are a little interesting because they're younger. The center, Connor Williams, he's only 26 years old. And I like him to bring him in. I don't know if he's like a great center, but he's good. He's a guy that will come in and he will stabilize your position. But because he's only 26, you have a little more leeway of how long you can keep him on your roster. You can probably sign him to a 3-year deal, right, compared to 2. But either way, he's one of those guys that'll come in and be good for you. And with that slightly younger age, he definitely has a little more higher upside, so maybe he could develop into something better. That's what I think about Connor Williams. And this last guy, Mekhi Becton, he was very disappointing with the New York Jets, but he is a physical monster, right? He's like 6'8" or something like that, over 300 pounds. He's only 24 years old, so he's still extremely young. And that's crazy to me. I thought he was like 26 or something like that. He's only 24. That's nuts, right? But the thing I worry about with Mekhi Becton is that he has weight issues. He has trouble keeping his weight down and keep staying in shape. And he's known to have commitment issues and not putting the best effort he could into the game of football. But I think if you get a guy with that young age and that size, he has tremendous upside. So if he goes to the right situation where you can really coach him up and get him, to commit his effort into football, stay in shape, and you can get a good coach, good offensive line coach that can maximize the raw talent that he has because of his size and his athleticism, he could really be, a diamond in the rough. I don't think he could be. I'm not saying he is. I'm not saying he's going to be. But in the right situation, there could be something there. Definitely. And going on defense, edge rushers, Jadeveon Clowney, he had 9.5 sacks last year with the Baltimore Ravens, kind of rejuvenated his career after a couple down years in Cleveland. And if you go to get this move, I have a chip on my desk. Huh. Well, that's something new I noticed. Either way, gotta love distractions. So, like I said, Jadeveon Clowney had about 9.5 sacks, and he was really good last year. He registered a bunch of pressures, and a really good defense that Baltimore had last year. He really showed out. And I think that, like a bunch of these guys that are also veterans, you can bring them in for 1-2 years, maybe 3, and they can really stabilize the position and be really productive. And I think Jadeveon Clowney would be the most productive compared to guys like Randy Gregory, who I have as number 2, number 3, Carl Lawson, then Emmanuel Ogbah, and then Yannick Ngakoue. I probably should put Yannick Ngakoue higher because he's a little younger. He's like 27, 28. But Yannick Ngakoue is more of like a strict pass rusher. He's not an every down player compared to Clowney, Gregory, Lawson, Ogbah, where they could be if they needed to. And then the last guy is Calais Campbell. Now, Calais Campbell is 37 years old, right? He has a couple years left, maybe 1 year left, and he's done. But here's the deal. Calais Campbell is a great guy. He won Walter Payton Man of the Year award. He's been a captain for almost every year of his career, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But when he was with Jacksonville, he was team captain. When he was with the Ravens, he was a captain. With Atlanta, he was a captain. And even at 30, in his mid to late 30s, he's still somewhat produced. He's not like he was back when he was with Jacksonville and Arizona, but he was still making plays. But the big thing here is that he's a class act. He's a guy that you bring in. Like, if you want to talk about bringing in a veteran and bringing that presence into a locker room, it doesn't get much better than Calais Campbell. Like I said, he's a great guy. He's a guy that will immediately elevate the players around him with his leadership ability and his play on the field as well. And I think whoever's getting him, if someone decides to give him a shot, they're getting a guy that even though his impact on the field won't be as strong as it was in the past, you will really feel it with the players that play around him. For a fact, that's what I believe will happen if you get Calais Campbell. Going into linebacker, you have number 1 is Shaquille Leonard, a guy that has a lot of upside but can't stay healthy. And he's one of those guys where you just take a flyer. You take a flyer, give him a 1-2-year deal, see if he can do something for you. Just like these other guys like Zach Cunningham, Tyler Makatovich. And they're good tacklers. They're good tacklers. They're smart players. And they're not going to give you too much. But they're guys that can potentially stabilize your position. I know that I've been saying that like a broken record. Stabilize. But it's true. That's what free agency is once you hit wave 2, wave 3. Wave 1, like all these top players you give the big contracts to, they're all gone. But in the second wave, there's still plenty of guys at every position where you can bring them in. They can play for a couple years, and having the stability of a position on your team, it means a lot, especially for like a winning football team. Winning football teams, this is where they thrive because they get guys that are productive, that are have plenty of experience, right? And they help really enriching that winning culture into a locker room. And that's really what you do when you want to go on a run, right? You have a bunch of young talent, your roster is loaded, but then you fill any holes with these veterans that can still be productive for you, play at a semi-high level at least, right? And really finish fleshing out your roster so you can go compete. So, it wouldn't surprise me, if within these next couple of weeks, a ton of these players just fall off the board like flies. Because they're still really good, they still fill the holes, and they have a place in this league, they're going to be good. And another guy that I have on this list is Isaiah Simmons, who's a lot younger. I think he's like 24, 25, something like that. But he's an athletic freak, right? We remember how he was when he was at Clemson. All right, we're good. But we remember how he played at Clemson, right? He played corner, he played safety, he played on the defensive line, I believe. He played linebacker. And even in his press conference, what position do you play? Defense. The dude plays defense. And it sucks that Arizona and New York, I almost forgot. That's embarrassing. But Arizona, New York, they really couldn't figure out what position worked best for him. And they couldn't really, he really couldn't find his role and find a place on a defense. But I think that the best thing, I don't know where he would go best. But he could really be a player similar to Kyle Hamilton, a guy for Baltimore who literally does anything and everything. He'll stop the run, go after the passer. He's a great cover guy. He's one of those guys that, using their athletic ability, he can do a little bit of everything. And that's extremely valuable. And I think if he goes to a situation, maybe a young rebuilding team, right, that could use a high upside guy, you could really get a lot out of him. And now that's kind of unlikely at this point, in my opinion. But then that upside is still there. You give him the right coaching, he's going to be something good for you. Right? And that's another one of those guys that can be a diamond in the rough. And going into corner, you got a bunch of other veteran guys. Starting with Xavier Howard. Xavier Howard is still a really, really good corner. I would make the argument that he's still probably top 10. But regardless, you bring him in, your secondary immediately jumps up. It jumps up for me, immediate upgrade. And same thing with J.C. Jackson. Not at the same scale, but J.C. Jackson got a really big contract for a reason with the Chargers. And his failure there, his lack of success, I think it was a lot more due to Brandon Staley than it was him. But I think he goes to a new situation, get him a 1-2-year deal. Right? He's a definite upgrade for any team looking to bolster their cornerback room. Adoree Jackson's a guy who's slightly younger. I think he's 1 year younger or something like that. But he's a guy who's very athletic. He's very fast. He provides you special teams value as a returner, although teams really haven't been using him as that. By the way, he's a guy that'll come in, upgrade your cornerback room, and that honestly, that just applies for everyone on this list. Stephon Gilmore, Avonte Maddox, Patrick Peterson. Some of these guys that have won a lot of games. They're really good players. They've come from winning cultures, like Patrick Peterson and Gilmore. Stephon Gilmore was a former Defensive Player of the Year. And these are guys that will immediately give an upgrade to your corner room. They're not going to be guys that are going to be there for a super long time. But like I said, all of this segment, these are guys that winning teams can really use to flesh out the roster to go make a run. And this is a team, and these are players that, for teams that are building with a lot of young talent, you bring in a veteran that teaches them a lot. And while their play on the field may not be, top tier like it once was, you will see their presence on the field elevate the players around them. Going into free safety, you have Eddie Jackson, Quandre Diggs, Tracy Walker, Marcus May. Those are the top guys for me. Guys that'll come in, play at a high level. They'll play at a higher level compared to a lot of veterans. Maybe not Marcus May, but definitely Eddie Jackson, Quandre Diggs, Tracy Walker. They're young enough to where you can still build around them a little bit, and it'll make a positive impact for you. But I didn't talk about him. Saving the best for last year. Justin Simmons is still number one. I still think he's a top 10 safety. You can argue top 5. He's a simple cap casualty from the Denver Broncos, who are doing a fire sale. They are rebuilding from the ground up. They are tearing everything down. And I think if you go get Justin Simmons right now, your secondary gets a huge, huge, huge boost. He's a guy where you can give him a 4-year deal, and he'll probably play out the 4 years of the contract and give you a lot of high level production. He's a great player. I really wanted to see him succeed. Go to a team that's really in desperate need for safety help. Tennessee comes to mind. I think that'd be a good fit for him. But either way, Justin Simmons is number 1. And then for my safeties, I have 2 guys. Micah Hyde, he's the number 1 guy right now. No question. He's been an anchor of that secondary in Buffalo for so many years along with Jordan Poyer, and it sucks that they're both gone. And it's a huge it's a bigger loss for Buffalo than it probably is than the team that gets him as a gain. Although whoever team he goes to, he's going to be good. He's going to be really good. He's going to play at a very high level. And another guy that you can probably sign to a 4-year deal and still probably get 4 years worth out of him, at least 3 in my opinion. And then right below him you have Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams is a linebacker to me. He's not a safety. He's not great in coverage. And with his size, he's a great guy. He's great for the linebacker position. But he's a guy he'll still provide you production. There's still value there, right? So with that being said, we got through it. Episode 2, that concludes it. And we just covered a whole bunch of different players. Oh my goodness. This script, by the way, ended up being like 3 pages long. I don't know how it did, but it did. And that pretty much recaps free agency as it is right now. I'll still continue to do coverage if any notable players get traded or one of these guys get signed and it goes to like a very specific situation. But if you're a fan of NFL football and you're hoping your team adds more players, there's still many good players available, right? There's still players that can be traded for as well. But specifically for free agency, there's plenty of guys at any position that are going to give you solid production and you can get good value out of. And that's the biggest takeaway from free agency and Wave 2. I've said it over and over. I'm not going to say it anymore. But either way, thanks for watching. I hope you like the podcast. I hope I'm talking a little better. I know I'm stuttering sometimes and I kind of ramble and repeat myself a lot. But I'm still trying to scrub off the rust, if you know what I mean. Still trying to make it happen. But either way, hope you like it, you'll enjoy it, and I will see you in the next one.